This is the Bat Flip Podcast. Now here's your host, Damien, David, and Matt.
Hey everybody, and welcome into another edition of the Bat Flip Podcast season preview series here. And today we're going to talk about the Milwaukee Brewers in their 2025 season. I'm Matt here with David today. So I guess we'll get straight into it here. Milwaukee Brewers in your team's division, David. They are coming off a season in which they won the NL Central, and they played the Mets in a heartbreaking series. They lost in Game 3 when a player that is no longer on the team blew the save in Game 3. They would have made it to the NLDS and played, I believe I don't remember who they would have played. I guess there was the Dodgers, yeah. Or no, the Phillies. They would have played the Phillies. Padres played the Dodgers.
That's right.
So that could have been interesting. But yeah, so the 2025 Brewers, a little bit of a different look this year. So I guess we'll start off, David. What do you think the status of this organization is right now? Just from like where are they at right now? They've been kind of in the same thing for several years here.
Yeah, I mean, this is a poverty organization having success against their will. Is how they've been, but that's the thing, right? It's been like that for years now, right? They keep trading away good players. They keep dumping off successful Milwaukee Brewers at the detriment of their fans, at the detriment of their organization, and then finding ways to succeed anyway. They've lost their manager, they've lost their ace starting pitcher, they've lost their closer, shortstop now gone. This is a completely different Brewers team than a couple of seasons ago. But like you said, I don't feel very strongly that they're out of it at all, right? Like this is probably easily the worst Brewers team of the last 3 years, I think. But again, they've gotten worse every year, and they've still been able to maintain the NL Central winning level over the last couple of seasons. The teams around them have gotten better, I think, but it's not a discount this Brewers team. They're still going to be scrappy. They're going to fight and claw for wins. They've got Pat Murphy at manager. He's the old school kind of hard ass guy, and he fits really well with what this Brewers team kind of wants to do, which is play small ball, steal bases, play good defense, pitch well, and find, diamonds in the rough consistently in terms of pitching. And they're going to keep doing it. That's just how this organization is built. That's how they run. They haven't stopped so far, and they keep bothering me, and I don't like it, and they're very good at it.
Yeah, this is a team that, as you mentioned, they really have won just about every trade they've been in. I mean, they've hit on trades pretty well. I mean, obviously we had the Christian Yelich trade where they basically gave up a bunch of guys who didn't ever make it for a guy who won an MVP and is still a very good player for them. The William Contreras deal, they got William Contreras, who looks like maybe the best catcher in baseball here soon. And they didn't really give up anything for him that's been of value. Joey Ortiz, they did have to give up a year of Corbin Burns, but they weren't going to re-sign him. And right. Joey Ortiz had a really good year last year as a rookie, and he's going to have another good year, in my opinion, this year. So another guy who was they probably won that deal. And then they've also drafted very well. I mean, 4 of the guys in their projected starting lineup were picked by the Brewers or signed internationally by the Brewers. So definitely an interesting organization here. But I guess we'll move on and talk about their offseason and what they did this past offseason. So here's a couple of trade additions, like we just mentioned. The big one for me, Nestor Cortez comes in, which is very interesting. He had a couple of really good years for the Yankees. Last year had some injury issues, but he was still pretty good last year. So bringing him into an organization that typically does really well with pitching, I think it could be a very good move for them. And then you add in Grant Anderson, who they brought in a trade as well. I think he will probably factor in maybe into the bullpen. We've got you've got Grant Wolfram, Elvin Rodriguez, Tyler Alexander. Those are all major league signings. None of which, I know Tyler Alexander a little bit, but most of those guys don't really know much about. But I guess we're going to find out. So Tyler Alexander's had some flashes of success before. Brought in a couple minor league guys. These are always worth mentioning for the Brewers because they seem to hit on these guys a lot. Mark Canha is one. He had a pretty good half season for the Brewers a couple years ago. And then Manuel Margot's been a big leaguer for a long time, has had some varying levels of success. We'll see if he does anything. And then just today, we're recording this on Monday, March 3rd. Just today, they signed Jose Quintana.
Yep.
So that's another interesting veteran pitcher they add. So, David, I guess out of these, kind of Nestor Cortez, Jose Quintana, which of those guys do you think probably makes the biggest impact for them? And then which one of those two minor league free agents do you think would probably be the best bet to make it to this roster and have a good season?
Well, the way you have to look at the Brewers is what's going to be the most bothersome in terms of the Cubs fan lens, because that's the one that's going to have the most success. Jose Quintana is 100% the answer here, because Jose Quintana, former Cub, obviously had several fairly disastrous years for the Cubs. And of course, he's been pretty solid with the Mets. The fact that he lasted this long in the offseason was a little bit weird. And him going to the Brewers is a natural fit. They need innings pitched. They're going to need a starter that can go out there every fifth day and provide 5 innings of 2-run ball. And that's what Jose Quintana does. And you just know his best 3 starts of the season are going to be against the Cubs. That's just how it'll be. But Quintana's a great signing. The money's completely minimal, I believe, and
yeah, I'm sure it is.
Cortez is going to be good, obviously. Between the two minor league signings, I really don't think they're going to have a ton of value, but Kana's a guy that he's older. He's still got the eye at the plate. I think he's got the positional versatility. He can still play either corner, outfield spot, first base, where Rhys Hoskins is right now, and he missed some time. Probably have to DH a little bit as well because he's not really as good defensively anymore. So I think Kana ends up making this Brewers bench pretty easily. I think Margot is the kind of guy that we'll see. That Blake Perkins apparently broke his shin, fractured his shin this week. Blake Perkins played center field for them last year. He was very good, actually. So Margot might be a shoe-in to make the team at that point because I think Perkins was playing center field. So that'd be both of them are probably going to make the bench then, honestly. And I mean, with this Brewers team, do you know Trevor McGill and Jared Koenig? They were that was Elvin Rodriguez, Grant Wolf from the group. That's who was there last year. Yep. We just didn't do this episode, but that's who was there last year. And those guys were like near all-star capable players last year. We'll talk about them more when we get to the thing. So don't ignore this page. This page has probably got an all-star on it somewhere.
Yeah, and it does have an all-star in the subtractions here.
Right, but so that's how the Brewers operate, right?
That's right.
They put a bunch of no names that we don't know about, and then one of them ends up on the All-Star team. They send away guys that were on the All-Star team.
Yep. Oh. So Willy Adames was the big subtraction. He had locked down the shortstop for them for the last, I think, 3 years. I think he was traded there in 2021. And he is now a San Francisco Giant. We talked about him some in the last episode, but that's a big loss for this team. He was one of their key players, one of their perennial all-star caliber players. I think he might have made it once, but he was one of their, a guy who could have made it in any given year. Joe Ross, veteran pitcher, they lost him. Frankie Montas opted out, which was interesting. He didn't have a great year last year, but I think he signed a decent amount for the Mets. So Frankie Montas is gone. Colin Ray is gone. He made some big starts for them late in the season. Gary Sanchez declined his option. I don't even remember where he signed. Baltimore. He signed in Baltimore. Yep. Mm-hmm. So he's gone. Wade Miley declined his option. He's gone. I believe the Reds. I think we talked about him a tiny bit on the last. I don't think that one's come out yet. But
I don't even know if we did.
We've recorded. Me and Damien recorded the Reds one.
Okay.
So Wade Miley is back with the Reds again. Mm-hmm. They lost Devin Williams. That's the other big one. One of the best closers in baseball. They traded him. Very interesting that they traded him. It's kind of the way we mentioned the Brewers operate, but they do so well with bullpen arms when you have somebody with the value of Devin Williams, who has some injury history, is getting close to free agency. You just feel like as the Brewers, you can replace him. Like you just feel like you're going to be able to pull this one out and then bring in some pieces that could really help the team for him. So we'll see how that works out. And then Owen Miller, they also traded him. He was a guess a platoon guy for them. So played a bit last year, but definitely a lot of subtractions here. I guess out of the Devin Williams and Willie Adames, which one do you think hurts worse out of those two?
I mean, it's Willie Adames, right? Like, I looked it up. He did not make an All-Star game. He was finished down the
He didn't
ballot in
really.
MVP voting twice, but he never
Yeah.
made an All-Star game.
Oh, interesting.
But that kind of tells you about everything you need to know about the Brewers too, right? It's, they have all-star caliber players that put up 3 to 4 wins above replacement. You feel like they're all-stars. We know they're stars, and they don't get the accolades because it's the Brewers, right? Willie Adames is he's going to the Giants. He just signed like $190 million contract. I feel very strongly that loss will be somewhat impactful on this team, please, right? But it feels like it should be. But at the same time, I'm looking at this is this Brewers team, and it's like, well, they lost Willie Adames. They're just going to put Joey Ortiz at shortstop. Like they're going to move Ortiz over from third. He's going to play short. They traded for a guy, Devin Williams, for a guy who's probably going to step in at third base. They're just going to keep chugging because that's just what they do. I think losing Devin Williams is a big loss. They played without him for half the year last year anyway. So, and they won the NL Central without him for half the year. And then he blew the game in the playoffs. Right. So, as much as I would like to say Devin Williams is a big loss, it feels like this is just the Brewers making the Brewers deal.
Yeah.
Sure, they should probably pay one of the best closers in team history, but they didn't Josh Hader. So it doesn't matter.
Yeah, for sure. But I guess we'll move on now and talk about their position player core here. Definitely an interesting core. A lot of young guys here. They have Sal Frelick in left, Garrett Mitchell in center, Jackson Churio, who is one of those breakout types in right. We have listed as Oliver Dunn at third. They have a few guys that might play third. Him and Caleb Durbin are two that might platoon some. Oliver Dunn's a left-handed hitter. Durbin's a right-handed hitter. I believe Durbin came in the trade for Williams. And then they got Joey Ortiz, Bryce Terang up the middle, good defenders, have some level of at the plate. Reese Hoskins is still there at first, one of the free agents they actually did sign. So that we'll see how that goes this year. Possibly the best catcher in baseball behind the plate, William Contreras, and then Christian Yelich still there at DH as long as he's healthy, which at the start of the year, I believe he is healthy. So definitely an interesting lineup here. David, I guess I'll ask you, out of we got 4 guys here that are young, are Brewers draft picks. They all have kind of come up at the same time. Well, I guess one's not a Brewers draft. Ortiz isn't a Brewers draft pick, but 4 of them are 3 Brewers draft picks, and then Joey Ortiz. Out of those 4, Frelick, Mitchell, Terang, and Ortiz, which one do you think makes the biggest jump this year, and which one do you think probably falls off here this year?
So they said Frelick gained 15 or 20 pounds this winter. He's trying to get bigger, hit for a little more power. That's real interesting. I know Damien's a huge Garrett Mitchell guy, was big on him in the draft process. As kind of Mitchell's issue has been the injury bug, right? It hasn't been the skill. We've seen he's got a big power. He's got a bit of a swing and miss thing, but it feels like he's the kind of guy that needs to come into his own over the course of a longer season, and he just hasn't been able to play a full season yet. Ortiz feels like the natural pick here because he's sliding over to shortstop. He was so good last year. I have to look at the stats quick, but yeah, 3 WAR for Ortiz, and he outperformed Terang in terms of offense. Terang was pretty good defensively, but Ortiz was playing third base. I feel like he's probably a more natural defender at shortstop than he is at third base. He's a smaller guy. So it feels like moving him off of third and, into that shortstop slot where he can kind of be a little more rangy, provide a little more value defensively feels like a good fit. And then, that'll be my pick for these 3 guys. I don't know that I trust Frelick to get to the power. He's just a small statured guy, even if he puts on weight. I just don't know that that's going to translate into true home run potential. And Mitchell, I just can't see staying on the field. So I'll stick with the Ortiz over Terang, even though I think both of them are going to be really annoying.
Yeah, I gotcha. They're going to be interesting to see how those guys. That's kind of going to determine what direction the Brewers go in here. Are these guys who are most of them are former top prospects? I don't know that Mitchell was a top 100 or Turang, but they were both pretty highly thought of. A lot of people
They were
expect.
back end on a couple of lists.
Yeah, a lot of people expected them to have some level of success in the big leagues. Are those four going to be a new core for this team to go along with Churio, who is 100% going to be part of their core, and Contreras? Because then you've got, six guys who are all young and locked down for a while that you have to going forward, and you can add around the edges to supplement them. But definitely going to be interesting there. I do want to point out Jackson Churio last year was incredible as a rookie, 3.9 WAR. He's 5-tool potential. He's one of those guys that you never know. Year 2, he might make an MVP caliber jump. You just never know with somebody as talented as him. And then obviously Yelich is a big bat here still. Hopefully he stays healthy. The bench, Eric Haas, Capra, Durbin, Canna, like we mentioned earlier, Durbin could possibly slide in and play some third base, the platoon there. We mentioned Margot might make it because of Blake Perkins' injury. I could see one of those guys staying in, either Durbin or Capra starting in AAA and Margot making it because of the Perkins injury. Perkins would be here if it wasn't for the injury. And then prospects to know, Jefferson Cuero is a pretty good catching prospect. Kind of interesting because, William Contreras is here. He's likely going to be here long term. I think he's got at least 2 or 3 more years of before he becomes a free agent. So he is in arbitration now. So you never know what the Brewers might do there. But I'd be surprised if the Brewers let him leave. And then you've got Tyler Black and Brody Wilkin, who are a couple other guys who might factor into that third base conversation at some point. Both have had some level. Wilkins a pretty high level prospect now. Black at one time was thought of as a really high level prospect. Took a little bit of a step back last year, but I think both of them could factor in at third base as well here. Yep. But we can move on now and talk about their pitching, this is where the Brewers always have seemed to figure it out. Like they seem to lose guys pretty often, and they just end up figuring it out. So in our current rotation here, and we'll have to talk more about this because there's a lot to it. We've got Freddie Peralta, who is a very good pitcher. He's been a solid for them for a long time. You got Tobias Myers, who was pretty good last year. We talked about Nestor Cortez a little bit in the, as an addition. He brings some stability here as long as he's healthy this year. Aaron Savali, they brought him at the trade deadline last year from Tampa when he had been brought into there from Cleveland. So he's bounced around a little bit in recent years, but he's had some level of success in his big league career, although it's dropped off a little bit since he left Cleveland. And then obviously today, they brought in Jose Quintana, added him in. That kind of replaced Aaron Ashby, who might also factor into the bullpen. He's done that some. We had him here listed. We figured instead of just taking him off and putting Quintana on here, we could still list him. So those will be the 5 or 6-ish to start the regular season. I don't know about Woodruff starting the regular season.
I don't think he's supposed to.
Yeah, he will likely be back sometime early this year, though. It won't be a super long time. So definitely factor him in, as he is this team's, if he's healthy, he's this team's best pitcher. Yeah. So we got to mention him some. But out of these guys, obviously we kind of know what Peralta is. Talk a little bit about what do you think the outcome this year is for Myers and Ashby. Those are 2 guys the Brewers have kind of developed a little bit. And they're just kind of interesting, as in like the metrics don't love them, but the Brewers seem to find guys all the time who overperform that. So what do you think about them?
I mean, Tobias Myers overperformed it last year.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
And that 1.3 WAR feels light for a guy who's 25 years old, entering his age 26 season, coming off a 2.2 WAR campaign. Even with the lower, even if he had a 3.91 ERA in line with his FIP, I feel very strongly that's still a 2 WAR plus pitcher.
Yeah.
Over the course of a full season. He only threw 138 innings last year, but that's still 138 really good innings at 3.0 WAR or 3.0 ERA, 2 WAR for Tobias Myers. That's a guy they plucked. He was on Cleveland. He bounced off the Giants. He bounced off the Rays, White Sox. He bounced around in the minor leagues, and he found a home in Milwaukee, which is what they always do. And now he looks kind of like a real major league piece of a winning rotation. Ashby, I don't think does. Ashby had a little more prospect pedigree. He had found his way into some top 100 lists a couple seasons back. He really hasn't been able to make the jump to the majors. I think as a bullpen arm, he fits a little bit better. The stuff might tick up in one inning spurts to bring some value back to Aaron Ashby. So I'm not going to spend any time on him, but I do like Tobias Myers. He's been good. I don't know that, it's one of those things where I can't even speak to, well, I think he's probably not as good as, the metrics say. It doesn't matter. It's the Brewers. He's going to have a really good season because the Brewers have this sauce. I mean, we're about to get to this bullpen. This bullpen is crazy.
Yeah. So I want to also mention DL Hall and Robert Gasser as injuries, and they could factor in as starters. I think it's time for DL Hall to move to the bullpen too, but we'll see what happens there. Sure. Bullpen, obviously, you mentioned Trevor McGill earlier, Jared Koenig earlier, Joel Payamps, Brian Hudson, Nick Mears, Elvis Peguero, Tyler Alexander they brought in free agency, and then Connor Thomas is a Rule 5 guy they brought in. We mentioned Ashby maybe being a bullpen piece, Hall maybe being a bullpen piece. I wouldn't be surprised if Thomas ends up getting sent back to, I believe they got him from St. Louis. So we'll see what happens there, but this bullpen is deep. It's very deep. I don't know that Trevor McGill, he had a great year last year. I don't know if he's the same kind of lockdown closer as you would have expected Devin Williams to be. You expected Josh Hader to be. I think he's very good, though. And there's only one guy in this bullpen right now, including the Rule 5 pick, by the way, that has a projected ERA above 4, which is Tyler Alexander. So everyone else has a projection of a sub 4 ERA, and this bullpen's just really deep. They got a lot of options here.
Yeah, and that's, these guys all came out of nowhere last year. So my prevailing thought is a couple of these guys are going to fail off, and then a couple more guys that we've never heard of are going to jump into this bullpen by the middle of the season and dominate, because that's what these guys did. Koenig was filthy this season. He's a big lefty. I think he throws from a kind of a weird arm angle and just came in and dominated whenever he was coming in to set up last season. Brian Hudson and Tyler McGill are both former Cubs. They've both spent time on the Cubs. Hudson was drafted by the Cubs, spent time in the Dodgers organization. The Dodgers missing on a guy like that, another lefty, big bowling ball, sinker guy, comes over the top. Like, Brian Hudson's this kind of guy that the skill was always there from his time in the Cubs organization all the way through, where if an organization could just figure out how to get this guy to throw it over the plate with any sort of success, he was going to be successful. The Dodgers couldn't do this, and the Brewers figured him out. So, it's one of those things where this bullpen is good. Obviously, I think Joel Payamps has been there for a while. He's been very skilled and successful. Tyler McGill is a true breakout closer candidate in terms of guy that can pick up 25 or 30 saves for you fantasy baseball people. But my assumption is half of these guys either get traded or hurt or something, and the Brewers pull 4 new total nobody's out of the air, and they're all great. Like that's how I assume this group works, that they have really good pitching development. That's how it's going to be.
Yeah, I believe, speaking of that, I believe Payamps was a throw-in the William Contreras deal, by the way. So if I remember correctly, I'm not 100% sure about that, just off the top of my head. But yeah, and then I want to mention one other guy that could factor in, Abner Uribe. He's going to start off in AAA. He has a knee injury, and they're just kind of bringing him along slowly. His projections have him at a 3.59 ERA. His control is bad enough. I don't know if he hits that, but there's a world where he ends up being like a shutdown type guy because he throws well over 100 miles an hour on his fastball. And also, the prospect to mention here is, I believe, Jacob Mizorowski. He is a top 30 prospect in all of baseball. He could factor in the rotation or in the bullpen. He actually did a little bit of that, both of those last year in the minor leagues. In AAA, he pitched out of the bullpen more. But this is another extremely hard thrower, touches 100. People really like his stuff. He walks guys, and that's probably why he could end up in the bullpen. But the swing and miss is there. He gets the ball on the ground a lot. There's a lot to like here, and if he ever gets to where he can throw enough strikes, he could be really good in either role. So, definitely a interesting pitcher to watch out for there. 6'7" too, pretty crazy.
All anyways, I guess are huge.
Oh yeah, yeah. So I guess we'll move on now and talk about the Brewers' outlook here in 2025. Their over/under win total is 83.5. So, David, are you going to take the over or under on that?
Over. You'd be a fool not to. Yeah, I'm the preseason. I'm taking the over. I'm not looking like a dummy, and then I hope that I can come back and look like a dummy because the Brewers struggled. That would be my personal hope. But look, I'm not leaving any salt on out of this one. I mean, I'm gonna be salty on the Brewers. They've won the Central a number of years in a row here, but I'm taking the over because you can't pick against the defending division champs here, even with the losses, even with the roster being at kind of the lowest level it's been. But you've got so many skilled players, Chorio, Peralta, Yelich is still there. We mentioned all the young core of guys. William Contreras is there. Like, they have a really good team. I think it's certainly a above 500 team, and the over under is only 83. You only got to win two or three more games over 500 to beat this over under. Even if they win 85 and miss the playoffs, that's still going to beat this over under. So feels low, but the battle in the Central is going to be between this group, the Cubs, Reds, and Pirates. I think all four of them have at least a non-zero chance to win this division, and the dogfight, I think, is going to keep the win totals down a little bit. Because there won't be a truly bad team in this division where you can stack wins. So, yeah, I mean, I'm going to take the over, but, I mean, confidence level lower, I guess, on that. But, yeah, over for sure, because this team they get it done. They have for years.
They surely have. I think I'm going to take the over too. As you mentioned, this team just always seems to find a way. We have Fangraphs projections out now, and I thought it was interesting. The NL Central here, the best team based on the projected wins from the Fangraphs projection is 84 wins for the Cubs, and the worst team is 78 and 84, the Pirates. That just kind of shows you how even this division is. I think every team in this division is going to be like basically 500, unless there's a fire sale from one of them because they feel like they're out of it at the deadline, like that, which is possible. But especially for the Cardinals, that could be very possible. But it's going to be interesting to see. I think I'm going to take the over just slightly because this team seems to typically figure it out, but we'll see. It is difficult to maintain that every single year. But odds to make the playoffs, plus 125, win the Central, plus 260, odds to win the World Series, plus 5,000. I think this is one of those teams that you're definitely fighting for either that division or the 7th spot. And it's very possible that they can get in here, but definitely a playoff type team. But we'll see if they're able to get it done. So, any final thoughts on the Brewers, David?
That odds to win the NL Central is, I would suggest, it's pretty juicy. Unfortunately, I think their biggest competition didn't do enough. I can't wait to talk about that. But I don't think that anybody in this division, and I'll pass it away from the Cubs specifically. I don't think anybody in this division did enough to separate themselves or catch that gap. They didn't do enough to close the gap. And the Brewers did a great job of closing the gap themselves and coming back to the pack, but they didn't do enough to pass the Brewers. So when we end up doing the Cubs and they're over under win totals like 85, right? Like you said, I think it'll be tough to take the over on that. I might take the but some team, what happens in the Central is some team ends up winning 90 games. It's usually the Brewers. So, that odds to win the NL Central feels pretty good. If you're going to bet on this team, if you're a fan of this team, you like where they're sitting, because this is where they're sitting every year. They're doing the same thing again. It wouldn't shock me if they win the NL Central. It would shock me if they make a run in the playoffs, though. I think that's kind of their limit, their ceiling. But overall, good team. Yeah, that's it.
There you go. Well, I guess that'll wrap it up for us here. We will be back with another one here soon. Appreciate y'all tuning in. We will appreciate it if you like, comment, subscribe for us. And I believe we're going to have the Blue Jays next, or no, the Blue Jays will be the one before this. I believe the next one's going to be the Rays. Same division, same color. So we're close, but yeah, appreciate y'all for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next one.